coming to tonight's. I pressed the right. Yep. Thanks for everyone coming to tonight's meeting. And apologies for being a little bit behind. I just had a quiet word with the Chief Executive about a particular issue. Could we start with agenda item 1, please? Apologies for absence and substitutions. Those arguments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can report there are no apologies for absence this evening. All of the committee is here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The second item is minutes of the last meeting. Are we all happy with those? And can we have a proposer and a second for those? Yep. Everyone in agreement? Thank you for that. Item 3 is declarations of interest. If anyone has any declarations, please speak now, or if something comes up during the meeting, I'd be grateful if you could let us know. Okay. Item 4, questions pursuant to notice. Questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm now going to do a slight break from the proposed agenda, and I'm going to start or move to item 6, report of the Head of Democratic Services and Elections, as the first item. Mr. Davison.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for moving that around. I do appreciate that. I know that because we're going to the rest of the discussion. I just wanted to put a couple of contextual things there. In the last few days, and the members will be aware, we've got an all-member evening tomorrow evening to discuss it. In the last few days, there has been announcements by government around the introduction of the proposals around devolution. Devolution is whereby a combined authority, an elected mayor is appointed for an area, as we see with Greater Manchester, with West Midlands, etc. Government are saying that they are going to, they're seeking to have elected mayors across the whole of the country, and that's going forward. The other part of the white paper, which was published, is also called Local Government Reorganisation, LGR. LGR is looking at saying is that basically district councils and county councils will no longer exist, and they will be reorganised so that you have a number of unitaries. So for Essex, instead of having 12 local authorities, 2 unitaries and a county, all of those would go, and then you would have a number of unitary authorities to be determined by a discussion and then in consultation and discussion with the government. There would be an element of consultation. Now, I can't tell you exactly in terms of the timescale that will be, or indeed whether or not that's going to be mandated. Today I've spent 2 meetings with ministers, 1 meeting with Baroness Taylor, who's the Lord's spokesman for local government, and civil servants. And roughly speaking, a number of them have been the same context around what does that mean. For your context tonight, and the reason why I particularly wanted to bring it up tonight is you've got a series you're going to discuss around projects, and I've asked the lead to come along and talk about projects. If local government reorganisation goes through, for this council and every council, we're going to fundamentally need to look at the timescale of that and what we are going to deliver, because it won't be everything, or what we're not going to deliver, and what we're able to do. And that timescale will be constrained. There's proposals where it could come in as a shadow in 26, you have a shadow authority, and then 27, or indeed even sooner than that. So a number of the key projects are longer term, and I think that that's something which, as a consideration, as you go forward. And I think you're quite right to ask for, around the project. I think it's really helpful, and I think actually it gives some reflection, and I'm sure the leader will talk about that a bit later. But I think coming back to scrutiny, and the role for scrutiny is, will be quite rightly, will be saying is, so if LGR is coming through, when we come back to discuss this at a future meeting, if you ask for that, I suggest you probably will, then how will that be reviewed and looked at to say what is it can go forward, set against the impact on capacity of the organisation. To do LGR is a very big task, because you have harmonisation of taxation, you have the review and the harmonisation of assets, you have the disaggregation of assets and taxation. You also have the myriad of, I'll give you one example. If, for example, you had a unitary authority where it was, say it was Braintree, Colchester and Tendring, we all three have different ways of doing housing. One's in-house, one's arm's length, and one's completely out. So all of those things, that's just what one service, all of those things, every service we do would look at. So therefore officers are going to be in the midst of, obviously over the course of that period, at the same time as saying what's the position of their job, because obviously also with the change of the jobs. Now I've sent out a message to all staff today to say about delivering our great services for our residents. I think every one of you would agree is in terms of the quality of what we do. And for our residents and the outcomes. And I think that's spanned over a number of years, so I'm not being political in any way. I'm saying about the council. So I just want to put some context about the issues around capacity and around the delivery for projects. I think that the other thing is, and apologies to Richard Barrett for kind of just stealing this, but apologies, but on this one also is, you've got on there later on, is the value for money. In particular, and the accounts which is there, and I think that credit to the previous administration and also carrying on with this administration around the value for money and about the positive responses from our auditors, because we finally do have the auditors' statements for the periods around the value for money and the key statements. And I think that the overall, they've not identified any significant weakness in the authorities' arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness in our use of resources. There was also a number of positive comments around the governance arrangements which we have in place, and actually when we do have any issues with them, about how we address it. So the challenges are going to be about maintaining that excellent position in value for money, whilst at the same time being able to deliver some of those projects, whilst at the same time, in terms of, as it seems, the white paper is saying, which has got to go through the process, the challenges around local government review. The reason I raise it is because you think of a white paper, we've got plenty of time, but actually the government's and the announcements are looking at as a time frame quite quickly, and therefore this will have an impact very quickly on staff, on our capacity. So in the light of that, that may help you in the light of that when you're asking for further follow-up around with the projects, would also be around, so what is it that we are going to do or not do, and how do we make that transition? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. Does any members have any questions for the Chief Exec? Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to certain contracts, and the one that's coming up tonight, which is the sort of the waste contract, etc., which is a major contract, will there be any clauses that will be put in that in the event that the council doesn't exist, etc.? Is there a clause that will protect the council? Does it take into account of? I know it's difficult to foresee what we don't know at the moment, but is there going to be clauses in it which will deal with that possible situation?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Absolutely spot on question, because that's what we're looking at. We have a myriad of contracts, and having got a myriad of contracts, we're going to have to look at what stage we are with each of them, and then if we're linked with other authorities, also how do we link those up so that we actually harmonise the services. Now that's having been through this and worked through in other areas, what often happens is that harmonisation might happen over a period of time. In terms of the waste contract, you might say, well, that's going to be right on the cusp of potentially the changes. However, we have to ensure that we have a waste contract in place to collect the rubbish for our residents. Just pick up on one point you made though about for this council, we would no longer exist. So it would be the new authority, and again, with the different authorities, they have different collection rates, collection methods. We also have, in terms of other contracts which are coming up, also with, as I said, with housing, there's different styles of contracts because the different methods of delivery. So that's some of the myriad also of delivery changes, and also of contracts and entering into contracts. As we go forward, we will need to consider that. The other thing we also do need to consider is that there becomes a point where you cannot what's called asset strip an organisation. So you can't just give away your property because you want before you go into a unitary, it has to be considered, and nor would we, but you have to consider that. However, the relationship which we have perhaps with town councils and how we work with town councils and give consideration to are there certain services which you could say we want you to do at a local level. Again, that's something that we will look at as part of those changes going forward. It just adds to the complexity of what we'll be looking at.
Thank you for that, Graham.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for on the projects then, so I know it's very early days, but so what projects are underway and what are planned? So will there be like a grading system and a priority of what we might want to deliver before any changes and how important they are to our district?
You're voicing exactly the sorts of questions we're having at the moment. And yes, we will need to. It'll be an administration, it'll be a cabinet decisions about saying what we're going to do or not do. Some of those projects, of course, we've accepted funding for, and therefore we're contractually required to continue with them, or if we're only so far down the line, hand back the money. So, for example, the Levelling Up, obviously we're Levelling Up Fund. We're already underway with that contract. Levelling Up Partnership, we have funding, and there'll be member decisions in there to say if there's going to be contracts which we're going to say, actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to narrow those down, or we're going to do something else. And I think that's going to be exactly there's going to need to be some meaningful discussion and cabinet reports about saying what are we or what are we not going to do in terms of what we're going to deliver. Which is, you've kind of articulated exactly why I wanted to preface your discussion tonight, because puts in context some of those projects now that actually they're really important, they're great, but if we can only do so many in this time frame, you will have to prioritise, or the cabinet will prioritise what is it that you're going to deliver against. At the same time, set against, as I said, the other work, whilst at the same time you'll still need to deliver things like the waste contract. And there's only certain numbers of people who deal with some of those core things. And I look to Lisa Hastings, our monitoring officer, Richard Barrett as our Section 151 officer, our assets officers, a few core officers around those. More or less every project has at some stage goes through and is filtered through them. And at the same time, I'll be relying upon them. Sorry, guys. I'll be relying upon them. Just heads up here. I'll be relying upon them in terms of if LGR does, as it seems to be going through, to obviously steer us and actually protect the authority as best we can as we go through that process as well.
Thanks for that. I think Lisa Hastings wants to comment, and then back to you afterwards, Graham.
All I was going to add is, in addition to sort of the conversations that the Chief Executive has been having, probably through to yesterday and today, I've been on a governance conference all day today, which this has been the topic of, as well as all the other pieces of legislative reform that's going through at the moment. So yeah, it's quite daunting times in respect of the amount that is happening to local government at the moment. One of the phrases that was used in the session that I had on Friday, which was preparing for this, was this is probably going to be the largest reorganisation of local government since 1972. Well, that was the year I was born. So, so you know, this is about the scale of it, as well as having to respond to the procurement legislation that comes into force at the end of February. You know, changes to planning, which are happening, you know, changes to housing, which is happening. So everything's happening at once. One of the things that we were told today was in the new year to rethink any potential transformation programs you've either started or about thinking about, because it quite frankly might be a waste of time. Yeah.
And that's a really interesting point about the transformation of Vice Chairman, because some authorities have been doing some joint work, but that might not be who they end up with in the unitaries. So that actually would need to be unpicked. So there's an additional level of complexity there. If I can just, if you just indulge me for one moment as well, is that you know, very passionate and very proud of the stuff which tendering over the last few years, over the last years, has achieved. And you can talk about those, and I'll let all the kind of the political and the points go through, but just indulge me for a moment. And very proud of those. And what you're seeing on some of those you've listed, and some of those which you were involved in previous administrations, and some of those who are now done and completed. For example, the beaches, previous coastal works, etc., is that I think that, you know, as that goes down, is about recognising and also celebrating that in the context, because that's been delivered by brilliant officers. That has been delivered above and beyond in the size of our council about what has been done. And I've just put that as a context of sort of some of the things in there. You know, in terms of the levelling up, for example, we've got 60 million. We've already delivered a whole series of projects, and there's a 60 million. That's one of the highest in terms of any of the districts in the country. The scale of the coastal works over the years in terms of projects, 36 million alone, plus all the work around the Crag Walk, plus the work around the North Point Save in that. Again, many councils have just let things go into the sea. We've protected it. We've had successes there. So many of you have been involved in that in different guises over the years as councillors. And I applaud each and every one of you for your passion and your localism in supporting that.
Thank you for that. Graham, you wanted to...
just come back on it very quickly. From a scrutiny point of view then, should we be looking at the process on how we're going to scrutinise? Because, as you said, it could quite well be that we will scrutinise something which is never going to happen. So would we have to do a piece of work to actually bring scrutiny into line the way we think it's going to move forward?
I haven't got an answer to that, because I don't know what it's going to be. But I think that there is a role for scrutiny in that. So, for example, if we're going to be looking at what projects we're going forward or not going forward, then you might want to ask the process of how is that, which ones are chosen or not chosen. I think that's a perfectly valid one. There will be things which will be part of the process. You won't have a say, just like I'm not sure the council will have a say around that. And just to say to you is that I will be bringing a report to the next council meeting, the Chief Executive's report to the next council meeting about LGR, to inform you, so that members can have a public debate around it at our council on what they say. I go to meetings and I represent our council. The leader goes to meetings and represents our council. I think it's only right that actually the council, if it wants to have a say or say something about that, we go on the basis of having had a council having a meeting at the council, but rather than it coming from a member feeling they need to put a motion or a question and it's on the back of that, actually having a report which sets out what we know at the time, and it will be what we know at the time. I don't know how much we'll know, but what we know at the time, in order that you can have that discussion at full council, and that will be in January.
Lisa?
I would also say, in addition to that, that we'll make sure that members are kept up to date with everything that's going on, but not just what's going on, but then the tools that you'll have available. You know, the white paper only came out yesterday, and I'm sure you're going to get the Centre of Governance and Scrutiny then produce something to say how could scrutiny get involved. So when we get those bits of information, we'll obviously bring them to you. One of the things I was just going to add, though, on the back of, I think it was Councillor Harris's question earlier about contracts, when you have if it's local government reorganisation, they will list all the areas that are just going to transfer to the new body. You know, so whatever that new body is, that you'll get an order that's passed by Parliament, which will say, you know, all these things are going over to the new body. So, you know, you'd probably have contracts in there, like you'd have assets, like you'd have all different things that the local authority does, and it will just, you know, I'm thinking of going back to some of the orders that were probably in place, sorry, when Tendring District Council was formed from the urban development days. I think that's right. So yeah, that's the way it works. Everything goes over in one or two big orders.
If I may, Chairman, and last night you all got a briefing around in your bulletin. I'm going to say to you is, I know that not everybody always reads them in terms of having time, but I'm going to be putting updates in the updates which I send every evening to you. So please have a look at them, because you just have a scan, because that's where you will get updates. If you look at yesterday's and today's, there is about the LGR and the devolution, the difference between them and where we're up to, and I will continue to do that. We will also have all member briefings. We've got one tomorrow night. Probably won't hear a lot more than today, although there are meetings tomorrow, but so as and when we get more, we'll keep you as updated as I can, in order that you're informed at the very least. And I know that you also get questions, and will get questions from your parish and town councils, for those of you who have parish and town councils, about what the position is as well, because they will be looking at what does that mean for them as well.
Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. If we can put the white paper aside just for one moment, I wonder if you could just let us know, what kind of collaboration between councils has occurred up until to now, particularly on the larger contracts. Now I'm thinking, the largest council next to us, Colchester. If you look at the waste contract or other contracts, has there been any collaboration, any best buying practice to give best value to our residents currently without this white paper? So are we aware of what contracts are coming up at any one time, for instance?
Good question. Yes, there is. So if I'm going to give you, one of the biggest things which we collaborate, for example, with Colchester is, of course, the garden community, and a huge amount of work that's gone on that, including the joint committee, and the work that's gone through there. And that, of course, is something which is also about delivering on your housing targets, which of course are increasing, and so therefore the importance of the garden community. We looked at and had discussion, and also looked at how others were collecting their waste and the compatibility. We also looked at things like, I'm sorry, I'm stealing Tim's one now, but also looked at things like, purchasing vehicles and doing it ourselves as opposed to contract. The key thing for us is, and I go back to the value for money, the key thing for us is about making sure that we don't create such a debt that we can't service it, and actually therefore doing the contract in this way was financially protecting this council. This council effectively, and I know to Richard will tell me the exact figure is about a few thousand, but we are debt free apart from that, and it's a debt which we want because it's at a low rate, but effectively, because we can pay it off any time, effectively we are debt free, and that is unique to many authorities, and that is because of making those sorts of decisions. But we certainly did, for example, on the waste, look at how on the different options. Same with housing maintenance, you can look at those, and as some of you will remember, I think it might have been certainly previous to for some members here, but previously at one stage we had an externalised contract, then it came back in, and we've had different housing maintenance and how we've managed it. So each time we do look both in terms of what other authorities are doing, but also in terms of what companies can offer, and whether or not it should be a service which is in-house or externalised.
Okay, thank you for that. We've been quite a while questioning the chief exec, and I know we have got quite a bit to get through this evening. So if we can, I'd like to move on to.
My apologies, Chairman.
That's absolutely fine.
It's always dangerous asking me to ask a question.
So I'd like to move on to Mark Stevenson, the leader. I believe he's going to give us a overview following our previous meetings to say where we are with the various projects at the different cabinet portfolios. And then we've got a number of questions which I hope you've received in advance. You haven't? Oh, that's going to be even more interesting then. I thought you had. So, okay, over to you then, Mark.
Chairman, I thought you were going to wish me a happy birthday first.
Sorry?
I thought you were going to wish me a happy birthday first.
Yes, I forgot. Yes, happy birthday.
As promised, Chairman, I brought cakes, and in the spirit of Christmas, it's mince pies. So they're on the tables around you. Feel free to enjoy. Okay, portfolio holder review. I just want to give a little bit of context of the sort of everyday stuff first, and then I'll come to the review itself. I've got a copy of the questions now. So I'm in every day. Portfolio holders pop in and out, and we all work in the boardroom. So we're all in one space, and we talk quite regularly on a regular basis, at least once a week, if quite often more, about various different bits and pieces. I'm going to speed it up because I know you've got time. As to the review of the projects, I have done that piece of work, thanks to your recommendation, which was very useful, in fact, it turns out. Part of the reviews, there were three things I focused on as review. It was the capacity to deliver the project, the governance around the projects, and the finance of the projects. We've done a bit of a whistle-top stop around it. We had a good kick of the tyres, as they say, and I'm fairly happy with where we are. There are a couple of bits and pieces which I'm sure are in the questions. But I think, for the most part, I'm comfortable where the portfolio holders are in relation to their projects, and they seem to be very much on top of it. One of the reasons the recommendation was useful, and it was something I always wanted when I was chair of this committee, was that we're pulling together a list of projects. And it's my intention, with a bit of luck, to produce that for the next scrutiny meeting for you to be able to see an entire list of those projects that we're looking at, and it'll show you the entirety of the work. Or not, as we've just heard with the LGR. Yeah, there's going to be some work around there. A couple of bits that were sitting there. I think all these reviews were had whilst I knew the LGR was in place. We didn't know what was going to be said. I'm still in the if LGR happens camp, then it will absorb serious amounts of officer capacity, as the Chief Executive just said, and therefore we will have to look at what is deliverable and what's not. And I just wanted to touch on one thing that was raised by Councillor Harris. He talked about, are we doing any work with other authorities? I quickly wrote some things down. We do the Health and Wellbeing Alliance with Colchester. We do procurement with Essex, with a number of other district councils, and we're hoping to increase that amount. We do emergency planning with, I'm going to go Oxford. We've just synced up our Malden, sorry. We just synced up our HR system, so we bought a new HR system that allows us to work with other things. And one of the things we're looking to do as part of the North Essex councils was to have an audit of all 8 councils to see what we do have in common and what we don't, and where when these contracts come up, we should be realigning where we are. So that was all pre-LGR, and I think that's going to be the conversation for a while. Unfortunately, LGR is just going to sort of hang over us until we decide, whether Essex is in or out. And I'm going to say that because I'm a big if fan. So I think I'll leave it there because I've got a lot of questions. Would you like to go through the questions, Chairman?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Obviously, this was at a pre-meet, we discussed it, and obviously various people have got various questions. And the first few questions are from myself, which are around, obviously, the CCTV in the town centre, primarily because it's one of the areas that I represent, and I've had concerns about it for a while. So if I read each one out in turn, and then if you're happy to answer, and then we'll move to Matthew for his questions. So the first one is, have all the cameras been granted planning permission?
No. I think was it last week, the planning permissions were submitted. Obviously, that was only a couple of weeks ago, so there was 3 planning permissions in there, and so I'm going to assume that they haven't been given permission that quickly. But they are in the pipeline and ready to be signed off should the planning officers think it's... I think they have to go in front of us though, because, yeah, so it'll have to go to a planning committee, and so I'm hoping they'll appear at the next planning committee.
So if I rephrase that slightly then, have we submitted all the planning permissions or applications that we need?
As far as I'm aware, I did see a few of them come in on the planning list that we all receive every week. I think that was 2 weeks ago. So I did see them turn up there. I didn't count how many was there, but yes, I've seen some go in, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've from my side, obviously I've seen what I call 2 batches go through. I think there was one around the seafront, and then there was a second wave of them, which obviously was what prompted the question. I thought, are we in the system? Okay, the next question is, regarding the CCTV project, what has happened and what is the progress?
Okay, what has happened? So I've got a timeline, which I'll send around to the committee after this meeting about what happened. So we started November 22, so that's where we started from, and we got to April 23 relatively well. Then we found out that we didn't have the relevant, the specification was wrong, the planning permissions weren't in place, and it just created a few problems. And so we had a good chat about it and decided that we needed to retender the whole thing. So we did that, and it came back in September 2023. And now, as your next question says, are we going to be ready for March 2025? I've got it down as the 10th of April 2025, so within 2 weeks of when you think it should be done.
Okay, thanks for that. And then the next question was, how did the CC project get so far behind schedule?
I think I just answered that one. There was a few problems around the specification and the tender, and that we had to redo the tender basically.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I was hoping it would be a little bit more specific, because obviously we're concerned about projects staying on course and the possibility of incurring additional costs, etc. So, but no, if that's your answer, that's your answer.
That's my answer.
The next question is everything going to be completed for the CCTV project by March 2025?
As I just said, our aim is 10th of April 2025, which is quite specific, so I'll go with that.
And the next question is, since the Safer Streets funding briefing note has been circulated, what has happened since then?
Yeah, you got me with that one. So I'm going to have to pass to an officer if I need to. Can you answer anything on that? Or? Yeah, I'll have to get you a written answer on that one. Yeah. Sorry, but if we haven't seen the questions, I'll get you a written answer to that though.
If you could, and obviously you can circulate it to the members of the committee as well, that would be really helpful. The next question, is the council adhering to the terms of the funding agreement?
That's one I'd have to look at, but part of me just sits there and says yes, but without actually knowing, I think I'll also get you a written answer for that one, just to be on the safe side.
Thanks very much. And then the final question here from me is, what is the financial risk to the council?
Not aware of one. So it's going to be delivered on 10th of April. So we've got the money passported forward. So we've got the extension on time. Everything's still in contract. So everything's still in the budgets. So I'm not seeing any financial risk to us at all.
Okay, thanks very much. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask on this particular issue?
Should we just go down the list? I've got Matthew Ben-Sillam next. I said, do you want to go down the list? I've got Matthew Ben-Sillam next.
Matthew's discussing a different subject, so I now...
Oh, sorry, you want
Yeah.
to stay on the CCTV? Okay.
Yeah, so I've just got to the CCTV there, so now I'll pass over to Matthew. Would you like to ask your questions?
Thank you, Chair. The questions I've got, Leader, are all around the site at Wheeley, and it falls into the same sort of category, I guess, as 2 or 3 other projects we've seen completed recently. The Honeycroft project, for example, the development and building works that have gone on there, and the Sunspot, both of which are prime examples of what a council like us can do. And I really do think everyone in the room would agree, and we've commented separately, that all credit goes to yourself and your cabinet and the previous administration, in fairness, for delivering those 2 projects. Outstanding. Specifically around Wheeley, however, we were just looking at, is there a proposed end date? Because there doesn't seem to be much going on.
This is a sensitive one because things are going on. And I think rather than put my foot in it, I've asked the corporate director to answer the questions, which, if you want, there's a few. You can have the same brief I had. Things are moving on that. How much we can say, I'm going to leave down to the corporate director.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor. I would agree, it's not moved as quickly as we would have liked it to have moved, and there are things in there that are confidential because we're dealing with an external contractor in relation to the sale of Wheelie. So at the moment, and I would say that all officers across multiple teams have been basically bent over backwards trying to push this scheme forward and trying to get an end date to it. At the moment, we are still struggling to come up with an agreed way forward with the developer, and as such, we will be looking at other options to see what we can do with the site, and in particular looking for the disposal of the site. We'll look to see how we can push that forward with some expediency. We're aware of the fact that there are ongoing costs related to the site, and that's certainly something that we wish to remove. We don't want that liability. As I say, it's difficult for me to go into any specific terms, and it's difficult for me to answer those questions. I think the original notion of selling the site and getting houses for social housing is a really good idea, but how we get there and how we get this to the end, it's taken too long, and actually it feels certainly like to our officers that every time we've moved to a position where we believe it ready to move forward and complete, something else crops up that prevents us from doing that. So where we are at the moment is to look at those options about how we can dispose of the site as quickly as we can.
Thank you for those answers. You can see that we're all feeling frustrated, and it sounds like the officers and the cabinet are equally as frustrated. It hasn't moved forward, and it's been kicking around for a couple of years now. With the sort of précis that we had from our chief executive, it's even more urgent that we look at it quickly.
I'd agree with you, and I can assure you that the leader and the chief exec and others apply pressure on a very regular basis, and we would agree it is something that we want to finish and we want to remove from our books, and we just need to explore those options, and those will come back to Cabinet to accelerate that process.
I think we'd all understand that position. There are 7 more questions on this particular site. I'm very happy to read them out one at a time and we can answer them, or you have them in front of you if you prefer to go through and answer them, whichever.
I think unfortunately it's difficult for me to go into any detail because of those negotiations and the things that we're looking for at the moment for that disposal. I mean, heads of terms are heads of terms. They were agreed. So what we're doing now is the negotiation has been in and around the actual contract for the sale and delivery of those properties. That's where the stumbling block has come about how we move that. And whilst it may not look as if anything on the surface is happening, I can assure you behind the scenes, multiple officers are involved to try to push this forward. You know, there are issues that are cropped up that we deal with. We've been working with legal services, been working with planning services, with asset management. There's an awful lot of work that has been going on in the background. It's just every time we think we've moved forward, we get something that prevents us from moving forward, be it a ransom, be it something else, be it the developer asking. As I say, it was really hard for me to go into those details as you're asking, because a lot of these things are private conversations that take place between us and developers.
I understand the position on that, I genuinely do. You've answered in terms of what's happened since the heads of terms were agreed, and it sounds like a lot of negotiation and to in and fro in and not much else.
It seems sort of trite to say just negotiations, but they've been quite lengthy and quite detailed between both parties, and as I say, including planning and other services to try to get the detail to push this forward. And I understand everybody's frustrations. I can probably mirror and probably match, if not exceed, those frustrations, because it is a good scheme and it should have gone forward. But as I say, things keep coming up. They create a block. Every time we try to clear that block, something else gets put in our way. And that's become frustrating, hence the reason why we want to look at other options to accelerate the disposal of that site.
To add something to that, there is a wider issue actually around Wheelie, which is not just the Wheelie site, but is about actually developers saying they want to deliver. And actually it's a bigger issue around our housing numbers as well, because we set a housing target and then developers saying will only develop at the speed at which they can sell properties, release them and sell them. And it's an issue which I know, I mean, I've spoken to Councillor Harris about this actually at a different venue. But the issue is that if they only release them at a certain time, then they don't want to suddenly do mass releasing, because of course it suppresses the price, and also it releases a lot to the market. So Damien is highlighting some of the issues on a particular site, but there is also a wider issue which will affect wider in terms of our how do we deliver against our widest housing targets. And I mean, that's a particular one. Incidentally, if I can just sort of say, he said ransom, it was ransom strips. There was nobody being held to ransom. Oh, sorry, that was me being a bit humorous. But
Okay, so I think we will accept that there's several items there difficult to answer at this stage. Could we ask you to write to us with the answers on those points?
Hang on, it may be helpful if Mark comments at this point, because he's been tasked with looking at a working group.
Yeah, I was going to say this working group's already met. I mean, you weren't present at it, but I mean, this is one of the sort of subjects that came up, and we're actually going to be able to look at it in more detail. And also being a private meeting, then some of these answers may come out. But I think the chief executive has just raised, I mean, we want to look at, I mean, asset management. I mean, we're now looking at IT, you know, assets as well. But I mean, we can ask some of these questions to understand how, when we do the next project, that we actually learn from some of these that we've got concerns about. But I mean, this is the task and finish group's work. You know, Councillor Harris, you know, made quite clear that this was one of the subjects that we wanted to talk to in that task and finish group, and we have actually had the first scoping meeting, and then we're going to go forward with actually looking at this and other specific projects, but also so we can learn from it, because quite clearly with government reorganisation, I think there's going to be a lot of assets that might have to move to other organisations as well. So how we do the job would be important to understand.
Peter?
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't at this meeting when these questions were put together, but I was at the previous meeting where I mentioned wheelie so many times they threatened to fine me £1 every time I said wheelie. So I Without going into too many details, I understand the officer's position in terms of the confidentiality on this, but from my perspective as a businessman, as somebody, I'm obviously the ward councillor there as well, you know, I believe that the council have dropped the ball with this. They really have, for whatever reason. And, you know, I think that this is something that the committee or the working group will look at. But it's, you know, coming back to the Chief Executive's point on the house building, I mean, I have spoken with the house builder concerned, and I know that in the site close by, it's going to take them 6 years to complete that site for 280 houses. And, you know, that's quite possibly at what stage are they going to take that? I mean, I've been there, I've been on site, I've spoken to them myself. And, you know, there's clear, this is, you know, Wheelie's been in the making for years. It might be 2 years or so since the heads of terms were signed, but it's been empty for some time, and we're still there. If this was a commercial operation, you know, I'd be pulling my hair out. You know, we need to look at this, and you know, so one of the things that I picked up on what you said, Officer Williams, was that the options are open. So does that mean that potentially one of the options are that it's going to go back out to tender? Thank you.
It certainly would be one of the options, yes. What I also would say is that as part of the delivery of those 7 houses, it was not waiting until the end of the development. It was right up front. So as part of our negotiations and discussions, the delivery of those houses was first.
If I may just add to that, the other thing was, for members, you all were very keen and very clear about wanting to add to the housing stock, the importance of housing and adding to the housing stock, which is why, Councillor Honeywood was then portfolio holder, was also looking around that was a way to take it by saying, actually, this was a way of getting 7 houses for our housing stock and taking it down, which I thought was a very, very good way of doing that. We then become, of course, rather than it just being a straight sale, which is then easy, you then become beholden of, you couldn't also just transfer the land and then wait for him to hopefully do it, because there's the issue of if the builder had gone out of business, then that asset, which would no longer be in our name, we then would have lost the 7 and actually any return for it, as opposed to getting the 7. So it was a deal which was done, which was complicated. It was a deal which was done in order, as Councillor Honeywood would tell you with his old hat on, to say is actually how do we add to the housing stock because of the acute demand which we have in tendering as elsewhere, which is perfectly good. But that then complicated it because, of course, the ownership then remained with us. Whereas if we'd have just been selling it and saying, well, gift us some houses, we'd have got far fewer houses, but we'd have got it on our books and it would have sat on their books. However, we wouldn't have got the number of houses. So it was a method of increasing the return of housing we could have got, but that is also reliant upon then the other party. There is a way of doing an alternative, which kind of both have skirted around slightly, and yes, we're looking at that as well. But that's obviously commercially sensitive, but you'll understand what I mean.
If I may, Chair, sorry. I mean, I fully accept what you're saying there, but I think that in hindsight, you know, we've been caught with a bad heads of terms that probably hasn't taken into account what happens if they don't take it on board. What happens if we could be sat here for years, and that's what's going to happen? And if we hadn't have raised this, would we sat here in another 2 years, and what's going to prevent that? So I don't think we're going to resolve it tonight. It's for the working group to look at that, but it is something that I think that, you know, I can say for sure that the residents of Wheelie are deeply concerned. We didn't want to see it go, of course, anyway, but I mean, who knows, with the white paper, it might still be owned by TDC and they might have a new use for it, but we shall see. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can I suggest that maybe this is the one we wait for the findings of the task and finish group, which I for one will look forward to, because I remember, as the Chief Exec said, it was a project that I thought would have been done and dusted long ago, and I remember the previous leader being quite enthusiastic to get that particular property off the council's books. So I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out of their findings. The next one is Graham, who has a couple of questions.
Yes. I think probably the chief executive covered the first one, what projects, and obviously we did touch on the review process as a scrutiny. But maybe that's just what I want to sort of not major on, but what was the review process? Maybe I'll just rephrase that. Was there a review process? Because was it more of a firefighting exercise? As as James has highlighted, certain things happened along the way, and you had to go back on things because of difficulties. So, so was there a review process taken, or was it more of a...
I think you're talking about me for this one, isn't it? When you were, I said this is aimed at me, isn't it? The review process of portfolio holding.
Well,
I'll answer the first question. What projects do you have underway? It's quite a lot. What I have said is that I will send a project list to this scrutiny committee. So I think I've got that covered. In 3 months' time, you can have a full list of what's going on there. There's too many. I could take up an hour easily, just talking about what's going on. As for the review process that was taken, like I said, it was about capacity governance and finance. So the portfolio holder and their relevant directors got together. They put a list of projects together. They talked about the issues and everything else, and then developed a RAG system. That was then brought to me, and then I discussed it, and with a scrutiny hat on, I was asking all sorts of weird and wonderful questions. That was the review process. So it was one portfolio holder at a time, and then just confirming that everybody was happy. Then we collated all of those projects into one thing. Management teams had a look at that as well, and we're refining it and fine-tuning it to a point where it'll be the first time you and I were sat on the scrutiny committee, asked for a project list and never had it. So I really am keen to make sure that we get that out. So the review process was really, and I'll thank the committee for it. It's been extremely useful, and officers have said it as well, to have all the projects in one place. You can sit there and see just the totality of what we're doing, and it'll be quite surprising for you to see what's actually going on. So I'm looking forward to giving to you that in 3 months' time. So I think that answers the review process part. Yeah.
Mark, you've got a comment?
No, I was just going to say that, if it's 3 months' time when we're going to have this list, will you have started to work on setting priorities or have some idea of what you're going to suggest to the council so that we can actually maybe discuss that priority list? Because quite clearly you've got a long list there, and by then, 3 months' time, you will have probably thought about what should our priorities be.
Absolutely. Some of it's business as usual, so we'll be doing that. But we have also got our priority list coming out it's actually out now. It's going to Cabinet on Friday. So you can see what we're going to be doing. We haven't set the milestones out yet, but in that priority list, it's quite lengthy and quite detailed as to where we're going with it. So hopefully there should be some synergy between that, the budget, and our priority list that you'll all get at the same time.
Just to add, if I may, to Councillor Cousins' question there. So the annual priorities, which we've always done in the past, you've got the corporate priorities, which are 4 years, and the annual priorities come out about what's going to be the focus on there. And I think that will help answer your question, but I think that may get overtaken by time, which is why I think that 3 months' time you'll be wanting to ask us, so what is the process to actually looking at what were your annual priorities 2 months ago, and how have they changed in the last 2 months? And I think that will be a question which there. It may be that actually we do something as a perhaps as a workshop or something, and actually just have a sort of wider look rather than it being in such a formality, because it's going to be a question for all members. And I think that's both as I say, discussion at council, ongoing all member briefings in terms of briefing about what's happening, and I think that will happen. That the iterations of those changes, you will find that it probably won't change just once, one of those corporate priorities, but that will keep changing depending on the discussions we'll be having, whether there is unitarisation and what the impact is on us, our capacity, etc., as I was talking about earlier.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything on Graham's questions? Okay, we'll move to Sarah, who has a couple of questions.
Thanks, Chair. My question is a bit more specific. What is the progress with the Clacton Town Board?
Okay, so Clacton Town Board, for those that don't know, was £20 million. It's given up to us over 2 years, 10 years, £2 million a year. That was the Conservative dream, and I'm going to call it that because it never happened. So we then had to put everything on hold during the election, and then we were paused for quite some considerable time while they thought about what they were going to do. We got news that they're going to look at this in 26, 27, and they gave us, I'm going to say, another £200,000 to help us with setting up the reviews and the strategic documents for the future. I think, to be fair, the town board's been in a bit of limbo, but there's been, the attitude in the town board has been that, do you know what, if we don't get the money, somebody else is going to give us the money. You know, so there's going to be another project, there's going to be something else. So we saw it with Harwich when we were just doing the luff, and government suddenly turned around and said there's an accelerator bid, and the only place that could actually take it was Harwich, because they had everything in place and it was such a short turnaround. So the town board's attitude is that we need to put these things in place so that if that opportunity ever arises again, we would be straight on top of it and we could apply for it and go for it, and have things in place. So I think we've progressed things. There's a website, just trying to think, it was only a couple of weeks ago. The shop frontage has been done, you've seen that. There are some initial problems that we're struggling with, and that they're around engagement from the shops themselves. So, but we've got a tourism group, Billy Ball chairs that, and he also sits on the town board. So we're getting interaction between the two. So there is a general, more positive feel around what's coming for the town. But as it stands at the moment, I think it was 250 that we were originally given by Conservatives, and the Labour just gave us another 200,000. So we're working through that. Does that help?
Yeah, that's good, thank you. Just another quick question. How many times has the local MP been to the meetings of the Clacton Town Board?
Apologies, I haven't seen these questions. I haven't been to every meeting, so I couldn't say whether he was there or not. So what I'll do is I'll get you a written answer on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Mark.
I was going to say, bearing in mind how we started the meeting tonight with local government reorganisation, do you think this board will be more important, leave a legacy? I agree with you, it's if and not definite that things happen, but if there's government reorganisation, is that Clacton board going to be more important to make sure that projects are continued when we may be being run from somewhere else?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the board is, you know, for its purposes, its own entity. You know, we're just the bank manager. We do the governance and the finance for it and make sure that, and some of the secretarial work. But most of the projects are done, you know, through the board. And I think as we go further forward, you know, you'll see more and more. I think the board wants to create its own identity and be more, have more ownership of the town. And I think whatever comes next, if something comes next, then yeah, but it will remain, and it's still very important, as you say.
Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. To answer Councillor Newton's question there, how many times has the local MP been to the Clacton Town Board? The answer is I don't know either, because I haven't attended. But what I can inform Councillor Newton and everybody here is that our local MP is engaging directly with businesses. The leader mentioned Billy Ball. I have attended a meeting with him and our MP, along with Elliot as well, directly. We are actively engaging with them, actively engaging with businesses in the town centre, and we are due to have a major meeting with businesses, and the date to be announced will be in January. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions on this particular? Lisa?
Just want to remind all members that we shouldn't really be referring to individuals that are not named in any way, shape or form within the agenda and the papers. I don't think we've got their consent to refer to them in the meetings.
Okay, thanks for that. Does anyone else have any comments on that particular subject? Okay, moving to the next three questions, which is from Bernard.
Thanks, Chair. What I've got is, what are the milestones for your savings plans?
It's just a memory test, that one. We did the savings plan because I think this committee actually asked for a savings plan. I'm not sure if you've seen it. So we confirmed it at Cabinet last month. Or, yeah, it was Cabinet, sorry. Do you know what? Councillor Councillor Goldman, I'm going to pass over to the 151 officer. He's got all the information in his head. Thanks.
Yes, and I think always with these things, things overlap, don't they? Because I think I haven't seen his questions, but when they were devised, because we got the meeting on Friday at Cabinet, so there's a report that's published that's going to Cabinet on Friday, which has I've noticed this in front of me. Have everyone got a copy of it? It's the coloured one. Yeah, so that basically moves on from the 15th of November's meeting, which was just the savings plan. This now says when they're going to be secured. So it's now got a 25, 26 and 26, 27 timetable for when they're going to come into the budget. So that hopefully gives you a sense of when they're going to be built in. So that'll be confirmed on Friday. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. That's fine.
Thank you. And just to add to that, it is also part of the budget setting process, so it will also follow through in terms of the savings plan that's in there as well.
Yeah, well, also, my next question would be, are you behind or ahead with the savings plans, given that, I don't want to keep going over the same thing with Wheelie, the costs that we keep incurring. Does that affect your savings plans in any way, shape or form?
Okay, apologies. There was 13 things on here, that's why I couldn't remember them all. I think the saving plans, we've already found the savings for this year, and we've done quite well around that. I think 25 set out in front of you, so are we behind? Well, we're not in 25 yet, so I'm going to say no, we're not behind yet. In fact, we're ahead, because they're right in front of us. But look, let's be honest, these aren't just going to happen, things that we're going to have to possibly invest to make some of these savings. I'm just going to have a quick look at it. The VAT on leisure fees, we're just starting to hear on that, our treasury income and government commitment to fund costs of national insurance increases. Some of these things, I think when we were having the review, one of the questions that I would have asked if I was a scrutiny committee and doing a Margaret Thatcher moment, is what are the risks? And I'm relatively comfortable with where the council is with its risks at the moment. The things that worry me, the things that make me not sleep at night, are the things I don't know. And it's not things we can predict. So to give you an example, over the last, 7 years, a worldwide pandemic, Russia invaded Ukraine, Liz Truss, Labour with its national insurance, and now LGR. These are things none of us could have ever predicted, and it went over across 2 administrations. So when we were doing budgets, everything looks okay, and then something happens and we have to adjust to it. Tendering is in a very good place. If everything stayed as it is now, we're good for a few years. The whole system would creak and fall over before tendering would, is how I feel, and I think the Chief Exec shares that sort of opinion. So I think, are we ahead with our savings? Are we behind? I think we have a savings plan. We have to do the work to get those savings. It's not just going to materially, because we put them on a bit of paper, happen. But yeah, I'm confident we'll deliver them. So, that answer your question?
And if I may just to add, the actual fund of the VAT came into our accounts today. So that was the first part of it. I think also in terms of local authorities generally, we are seeing a number of authorities which are having what's called Section 114 notices, which are basically authorities which cannot sustain themselves, and it would be the equivalent of a company being bankrupt. The councils can't go bankrupt, but that's what the equivalent is seen as a Section 114 notice. But we're not in that position because, as I say, we are debt free and we actually have a 10-year forecast. The auditors, which have done our value for money opinion, which I know you're going to talk about later, but it's apposite to what you're talking about. That they've noted that for the foundation of our long-term plan, we undertake risk assessment, we regularly review our reserves, we provide updates as quarterly reporting, we capture potential cost pressures as timely as possible, we maintain an asset strategy, we have a well-maintained approach to our coastal protection responsibilities, and we keep our HRA business plan up on a regular basis and reviewed on a regular basis. So our auditors have gone through sort of 10 key sort of findings in terms of the value for money. So in answer to your question around the savings plan, it fits in with our 10-year forecast, which is a rolling programme, which was started. I'm looking at Paul because he's got a better memory on some of these things than me, but if I'm really honest, I'm probably going to say about 2018, something like that. It was because Carlo was the portfolio holder at that stage with it, and we've rolled that forward each year, and the auditors and many of councils have kind of said that's what they should have done. The thing it does do in terms of the savings plan and in terms of rolling it, it means that if you have a sudden target where you've got to take savings, you take the savings. But then if you've taken out a service, you can never put it back in. Whereas actually, if you manage it over a 10-year forecast and actually can manage that, therefore you don't take out a service which you then subsequently say, oh, well, I can put that back in there because it's too late. So that's why the 10-year forecast has been so successful in terms of managing us and keeping us in the position that we're in.
Thank you for that. Cool.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Does anyone else have any comments? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really. Reassuring that the government have agreed to reimburse the council the cost of the national insurance increase there. I'm sure residents will be very, very happy with that. But it just underlines the issue that local businesses have. They're not so lucky. They're not going to get anything reimbursed. We mentioned the Clacton Town Council Board, or the Clacton Town Board and businesses and how we want to support them, etc. It's worth just thinking about, the help that they are not going to get in terms of national insurance, and that will cost businesses, that will cost jobs. But thank God the council have picked up a reimbursement there.
Well, Councillor Harris, that, if I may, Chairman, that's actually an interesting point you make, because it's not thank God, because of course it has a knock-on effect to us. Because every contractor who we use, every firm we use, which is not the council, means that also the national insurance goes on that. So that will have an impact on us, and we are also very aware of that and are looking at that. So thank you for highlighting that, because it adds to our strain. It doesn't take it off.
I was saying that tongue in cheek.
If I may, I knew that.
Okay. Thanks for that. There's one more question under this section, and that's from Sue.
What is the current position with the old Savoy nightclub in Clacton Town?
If I may, that's at the moment is a kind of a sensitive position. Sorry, apologies. Because of what I'm going to say is a more general thing is that we are one of the 10-year priorities of the Arts Council. We're looking at various different options around how we undertake work in the town centres for improvement, as you know. But at the moment, that's obviously a site which is sensitive in terms of what we are doing or not doing. So we'd rather kind of come back to members subsequently on that one in terms of the sensitivity. As you well know, if you've got privately owned sites, that's an issue.
Does anyone have any follow-up questions on that? No? Okay, well, that's the end of the questions for that particular item. I think you've, as leader, you've been slightly wrong-footed because it was my intention that the questions were circulated in advance, and obviously you didn't get those, which I think is a little bit. It didn't give you the full opportunity to respond. So my suggestion is, obviously on quite a number of the items you said you'd respond in writing, which is great, and that will be circulated to members. Be grateful if you could do that for as many items as you could, if you want to put more detail in from the questions. And I'm going to suggest that the committee reserves its recommendations until our next meeting in January, when we can tie it up with the priorities and budget. I don't know if members are happy to do that, and I think that will give you a little bit more time to respond in detail, but it'll also give us a little bit of time to look closely at what you've said and hopefully come up with some helpful recommendations for the future. Are members happy to do that? Could I have a seconder for that suggestion, please? Carolyn, yes?
I'm not seconding or moving it before Mrs. Hastings, but so yeah, I was going to say before she tells me off, I knew I wasn't moving or seconding, and obviously entirely the prerogative of the committee there. As part of that subsequent, you will have more detail around LGR. So as part of that, either now or in your recommendation subsequently, you may well want to include, as we talked about earlier, about looking at that prioritisation of priorities because of depending on the position of LGR. But I'm not saying you should do it tonight. I'm just saying not losing that, and when you do it in January.
That's fine. Does anyone else have any comments? Mark?
More than happy to do that, Chairman, if that's the way you're going to go ahead. I would like to add one caveat. I didn't realise your next meeting was in January, so that list of projects won't be coming to the January meeting. I was under the impression it would be three months. So, because we've only got 3 days left of this year, really, from a council point of view. Yeah, I'm going to take the 6th and say I'm going to push it sort of to the end of the financial year for it to come to your committee, whichever's closest to then.
Yeah,
I'm happy to do responses, but Councillor said he asked what projects do you have underway. I said to him I'll provide him with a list, thinking that your next meeting was somewhere around March. Clearly it's not, it's in January, so I won't be providing that list for January, but it will be around for March.
Okay, I mean if you can give us a part list to be continued.
I'll do what I can.
And then obviously from our side that'll give us a chance to have a look at that, because I'm sure people will have time over Christmas where they've got nothing better to do than read through the paperwork that you provide.
I can guarantee I won't be given any Christmas reading. So.
Thanks so much for your time on that.
Chairman, with your leave, I'm gonna go. I said, with your leave, I'm proposing to leave you. Thank you.
I'm conscious that I've missed out item 5, but I thought it'd be helpful to do that after we've heard the responses to the other agenda items. So I plan to look at item 7 next, which is report of the portfolio holder for environment, update on the waste and recycling service procurement. And again, there are a number of questions which sounds like you didn't get them in advance either.
Thank you. I've literally just seen them.
Okay, so all I can say is I do realise you're new to the portfolio or relatively new. So if you can answer, please do. If not, perhaps we can go along the same lines. And if you follow up with written responses circulated to members of the committee, and then we can obviously do our recommendations on that in the same way to try and come up with some constructive comments for you.
Lovely,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Well, good evening, and thank you for inviting me tonight. The report that you have in front of you, along with the appended Cabinet report from July, provides a comprehensive update on the current position. The waste contract is the largest contract that the Council has in terms of value, and the service is one that touches all residents on a weekly basis. There is significant reputational risk for all councils associated with waste and recycling collection services and the cleaning of streets. I'm certain that we can all agree the importance of making sure that we get this right. The Council has set aside a budget of £300,000 so that we are able to take the necessary time along with the appropriate level of resource to ensure we specify the right level of service to allow us to optimise the procurement process. This money has so far been used to engage various specialists and consultants. With these organisations on board supporting our knowledgeable and committed officers, I feel we have the best possible team around us to deliver the right service for our residents. I should highlight that the budget of £300,000 for the consultants and specialists is a small fraction of the 8-year or possibly 16-year contract value and could potentially save that money off the annual contract value. The procurement process has now started, having been launched in October. Bidders have been invited to submit their detailed solutions and we will receive those later in January. There are a number of stages to this process as we are using a competitive dialogue procurement. Once the detailed solutions are received, they will be evaluated and bidders invited to participate in a series of discussions about key aspects of the proposed service. This dialogue process will shape the service specification and consequently the price. Once the dialogue phase is completed, bidders are invited to submit their final solutions and the winning tender, following evaluation, will be awarded the contract subject to Cabinet and full Council approval. Whilst my brief explanation may make the process appear straightforward, it is in fact very resource intensive and detailed, but will give us a better outcome than had we not chosen to use the competitive dialogue approach. As the procurement process is underway, I'm afraid there is a limit on how much I and officers can reveal about how the process is going, so please be mindful of that when asking any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for that. There was quite a bit to take in there, so if you could be kind enough to do so, I wonder if you could arrange for that to be your opening remarks to be circulated to members of the committee.
Yes, I have no problem with that.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It saves us listening back to it because, as I say, with the amount of information in there, it's easy to miss something. Now, we do have a number of questions that were raised, and as I say, I think it may be that you wish to respond in writing if you don't know, being relatively new to the portfolio. Are members happy for me to ask the questions, or would someone else like to? All right, Carolyn. Yes, I don't want to.
Okay. So if you can't answer them, that's fine. You know, we know you're new to the role. So has the waste and recycling service kept to the timelines as far as you're aware?
It has pretty much kept to the timelines. We are currently looking still at I actually had this written down because I knew that this might be get asked. We are still looking at June, roughly, to come to Cabinet with this.
Okay, fabulous. So what happens if the timeline slips?
Because of the process that we're using, the extended dialogue process, it does give us the opportunity to change things a little bit. So we should be okay with that.
Brilliant. And what happens if the budget goes over?
So there are some things that are coming in that will change things around. Sorry.
Adrian, would you rather just take the questions away and just write us a little summary beside each question? Would that be easier?
I think if I'm honest, it's more to do with the fact that I am mindful of the procurement process.
Yeah.
And so I'm more concerned that I'll say something that shouldn't be said. It is probably easier if I answer this in writing.
Yeah, brilliant. That way you can check it all out. Yeah, cool.
Lisa would just like to come in before your next question, please.
I think with regards to the budget position, and I just don't want to step on Mr. Barrett's toes, but there was some information within the cabinet report which set out what the financial position was, and also what the principles were about the budget. So you've got that in front of you. So that forms part of the agenda pack. So that is the current position until we receive the bids back.
You have to carry on? Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy. Just so it's, I suppose, recorded. There were a couple of other questions, and I'll read it out so people are aware of what we're asking. That's what happens if the budget goes over. What happens if the lowest bid is over the budget?
Can we answer that one though? Because that one can be answered.
I think that's probably easiest to pass over. Yeah, is that okay? If I can ask the Director.
Yeah, so yeah, if obviously the procurement process, we've got the competitive dialogue process, so we'll have a set of bids that come back. So the first round of bids will be priced up. We'll evaluate those, we'll have conversations with the bidders, so we'll know at that stage what the price is looking like. So the dialogue enables us to shape to some extent the specification that we're asking for, so we can maybe reduce the price if maybe we need to. And then if we go out after that and the final bids come back, then it's a general conversation about amongst members as to what budget do we want to put to the project. So there's a number of phases we can adjust the price.
Peter?
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions. You mentioned the use of consultants. Do we have a total cost so far of consultants? That's question one. Question two will be, obviously, the elephant in the room, as we've already spoken about, is the new government white paper. You're saying that you're looking at bringing this back to Cabinet June next year. By then, I think that things will be a lot clearer. In terms of the tenders that you are putting out at the moment, have we done a risk assessment on the implications for those contracts should it become clear that, let's say, we're going to amalgamate with, let's say, Colchester, or that's the likely route? Have we got a risk assessment of where we are with the contract, and does it scupper some of the stuff that we've done now? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to that, Peter, it's not relevant to this contract. Now, this contract still needs to go ahead. Some of the questions that you asked about different authorities, they provide their waste services in a different manner. So Colchester in-house, we're contracted out. And so it's really difficult to look at that. We haven't got the luxury of time to sit and wait to see what a white paper does. We have a waste contract, statutory obligation to provide the collection of that waste. And so we have to plough ahead with this contract. And interesting, the Chief Exec said earlier on, this is one of those things that will, over time, be amalgamated into a new organisation. But for us, no, we will keep moving. Our timescales are tight. It always, a new contract to start in April 26 sounds like you've got all the time in the world, but the reality is we don't. Within that, there's a period where if it's a new contractor, they will have to be able to manage to deliver the service. If it's an existing contractor, they will have to do the same and look at the way in which the service is being provided. So from our perspective, no, we will carry on moving. The white paper is the white paper, and that will do what it does. But in relation to what we're doing with the waste contract, we will carry on moving ahead. Sorry, if I might, with regards to your first question, £128,411 so far of the 300,000. I think Mark's got a question, then Graham. Oh, sorry, Graham.
So in the new contract then, I know it's very awkward because, you know, we've got other events going on. But I think in the old contract, I think what was shown up was the massive developments which took place over those 14 years of that contract. So going forward, with all the government's announcements about house building, is there wriggle room in that contract? Because obviously I presume they just do a rough guesstimate for development. But if they do double the number, then is the contract going to be robust enough for us to offer the same service?
I'm going to pass that over if that's okay. Tim and I are happy to answer.
So the current contract, included in the contract, you get a certain number of additional houses in the district, then the contract then will increase to compensate for that. So the same thing is built into the specification for this one. So you're talking about the additional houses in the district and the impact that has on the contract. So let's say there's 1,000 extra houses in the district. The contract then steps up in terms of how much we're paying for it, so the contractor can step up. So that's all built into the existing contract and will be in the new one.
So there's an additional cost to that then, per house or per 100 houses or whatever.
Okay. Peter?
Thank you, Chairman. That's a really good point, Councillor Steady, because it just reminded me of something that has happened in Wheelie again, where we've had new houses. And yes, I can understand number of houses means more big waste bin collection, etc. But what it also means is that there's more dog owners and there's more dog waste bins, and the level of the time it's taken for Wheelie to get waste bins is just phenomenal. It's just ridiculous. So is something like that, the consequences of more houses means more dogs, dog walkers? Is that inbuilt into this new contract as well? Because it was a nightmare for Wheelie.
Yes, the number of bins provided that can be adjusted to increase if required. But a lot of new developments, bins will be provided as part of the development, and then they're serviced by the developer or their managing agent for a period of time. And then in the future, they sometimes transfer to us. There's lots of different arrangements. We can flex if required.
And just a point of clarity there as well, as the contract flexes and as you said it increases, etc., who pays for the extra increase in dog waste bins? Is it the TDC or is it the parish council?
So, well, it will be the TDC, but then bear in mind there's additional revenue from the council tax that comes in as a consequence of the new builds. So.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that. You said the TDC and not the parish council will pay for that in future. Thank you. Thank you.
You obviously
hit that, Chairman. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Right, Lisa.
Councillor Harris, subject to what comes out of LGR, because parish councils could be caught by LGR as well.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments on this particular item? As I say, as with the previous, it would be great to have responses. Obviously, don't be shy at putting additional information in, or if there's a question we haven't answered. I know it was a reference to Mrs. Thatcher. If there's a question you'd like to ask and then give the answer, then please do. We're happy to receive the information, and then we can hopefully come up with some positive proposals for the future. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Our next item is item 8, which is the report of the Director, Finance and IT, External Auditors Combined Annual Report, including their value for money commentary on the Council's use of resources. And I think that's over to you, Richard.
Thank you for that. And I understand this was a request to come here because the natural home for this report is the Audit Committee. So this went to the Audit Committee last week because it's under their terms of reference, because it forms part of the statement of accounts process. So the natural home is the Audit Committee, so it has gone there. And I know it was requested to come here as well. But I think it's a really important point as part of your kind of overall sort of look at the council's finances, because what we haven't had for the last 4 years, because of external audit delays, we've had no independent view on the council's financial standing, financial governance arrangements. You basically have my word for it, if nothing else. So I think it was long overdue. I think it's important. As you read in the report, it's a fairly long report, but I think it's a slightly reduced scope. So you've got our outgoing auditors, BDO, so they did the 3 years that were outstanding. So they've done their value for money report, and it's reduced scope. So they've concentrated on financial sustainability and governance. But when you look at the report, I think it reads well. I think it does say exactly what the council's doing. It addresses the approach to the budget, the approach to long-term forecast, the approach to reserves, the approach to our awareness of cost pressures, and it covers the questions you've asked tonight, all those sorts of things. Are we aware of that? Are we reacting to the right things? And again, with the governance arrangements, it's slightly it's sort of timely, because the auditors have reported since 2020-21 right through to 22-23 accounts, but they do bring their work up to date. But a bit like buses, you've had the BDO one, which we've waited for quite a while, and yet our new auditors, who are looking at 23-24 position, they're going to provide their own commentary, and that's going to go to Audit Committee in January. So that's again really helpful, and it's timely because it's part of our processes now with the development of the budget. So is there any failings or any shortcomings? I think their conclusion was they've not identified any weaknesses. That's always pleasing to read. So I think it gives hopefully good context. Hopefully it informs the committee in terms of things that you want to probe and sort of discuss when you look at the budget in January. But I won't say any more than that, apart from the fact I think I welcome it, and hopefully you do as well, as an independent view on the council's position, which has been sorely missing for the last 4 years.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think Sarah's got a couple of questions, which I'm sure you'll be more than capable of answering.
Thank you, Chair. Does this impact the council's financial forecast at all?
Not directly. I think the auditors have reviewed the way we go about our financial forecast and financial planning. There's no recommendations that come from that. I was expecting some recommendations to some extent, because auditors, bless them, they normally come up with some recommendation, but they haven't. So in terms of the forecast, it carries on as it is. It's still working. We've got confidence in it in that sense. And some of the words that were said tonight about the plan gives us time. I think that's the most important thing. Our financial position gives us time. It's backed by the forecast risk fund, which is equally as important, because some councils unfortunately get trapped into this annual cycle, and they're making cuts in a very knee-jerk way. This council's always taken a view that they didn't want to do that, and they wanted to make sure. It's a bit like the waste discussion we've just had about what happens if it's over budget. That's a very important question if it is over budget. I think one of the things that we try to do is give ourselves time to respond to that. If we said it's over budget, we've got to find out within 1 year, that's going to be quite difficult. So what our financial process does is gives us that time to 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, underwritten by the forecast risk fund, to make an informed decision. So I think that's really useful, and it was recognised by the auditors that approach we take. So it hasn't got a direct impact in terms of the numbers, but I think in terms of how we go about it, I think it adds kind of good confidence to hopefully sort of we're doing the right things. So we'll continue to do so. But KPMG, looking forward to KPMGs, which I appreciate. I've sort of answered your question before you've answered it. Forgive me, because KPMG is the most up-to-date position, and that will be going to Audit Committee in January. And obviously, if you request that back, that report as well, then hopefully we can come back to a meeting shortly after Audit Committee have had that. I think Audit Committee it's right at the end of January, isn't it? 30th of January. 30th of January. So that's going to go there if it doesn't slip. They're really confident it will get to that meeting. So we'll have another version of that from KPMG shortly.
Thank you, Richard.
You happy with your answers? Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Ask Peter.
Not really a question, thank you, Chair, but it's more of a sort of an observation, really. I think that, you know, I'm fully expecting the KPMG report to find sound financial management under your guidance, and we're going to be found to be a well-run, financially viable council. I just hope that with this white paper coming in, that should we amalgamate with any other local councils, that they are equally as well run and financially sound. Otherwise there could be some real major questions there. Maybe something for this committee to look at in the future. Thank you.
I think that's more of a statement than a question. I don't know if you want to add anything. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? No.
So the committee will be.
Okay, well, thanks very much for your time, Richard, and I think everyone's happy with the report. So thank you for your time. Yes, it moves us back to item 5, which is the work programme. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or comments on that. Okay, at the on page 18, there is a number of recommendations there. I'm happy to read them out if you would like, and then welcome any comments. So the recommendations are, if I can get the crease in the right place. A, considers and notes the progress with inquiries set out in the work programme 24-25, plus any feedback to the committee on the decisions in respect of previous recommendations and the list of forthcoming decisions. B, invites oral updates on the work of the 3 task and finish groups established by the committee, as referenced in the work programme at Appendix A. And then obviously B1, asset management arrangements, that's Councillor Mark Cousins is chairman. B2, council enforcement arrangements, that's myself as chairman. And then B3, housing strategy development and temporary accommodation. Its meeting on Thursday the 19th of December will determine its chairman. C, determines the committee's approach to budget scrutiny to be undertaken at its meetings on Monday 6th of January, which is an informal, and Monday the 13th of January 2025 in respect of the draft general fund and draft housing revenue account budgets for 2025-26 and beyond. And D, notes that the arrangements will be made with the chairman of this committee and of the audit committee to receive the findings in relation to the investigation into the council's development of Spendles House, Nays Park, Walton on the Nays. So does anyone have any comments or thoughts on that, please? Mark.
I mean, just an update on B1 then. I mean, the asset management task and finish group is actually, we're probably running 2 task and finish exercises because we're looking at the physical assets, which has been one group. We've also looked at the IT assets, And so it's effectively, we're almost running 2 task and finish groups. We've had a scoping meeting on both of those, and now we're just waiting for the officers to come back on both of those items, and then we're going to do an overview on that and then start to drill down into some of the issues that have almost come out of the scoping meeting itself, because we discovered a few interesting things that we want to explore further once we understand how the systems work. But we have almost created 2 task and finish groups in one, so we're going to do it as 2 separate items.
Thank you very much for that. Does anyone have any comments for Mark, or no? Okay, one of the things that we need to look at is how we're going to scrutinise this budget with the portfolio holders. Now, it's been done in the past. It was quite a lengthy process in which we went through literally every line of the budget and questioned each and every portfolio holder in turn. Last year we didn't do that. We tended to focus more on what we thought were the key issues within the budget, or the ones that really needed a closer examination. So my question to yourselves is, how would you like to proceed this time around? Graham.
I think we should highlight what we did last year to say, you know, what are the highlights. But I still think we should have the portfolio holders in to actually put that question to them.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments, Mark?
I was going to say, a little bit of me sort of fondly thinks back to, you know, the subcommittee A, B and C looking at through things in great detail. But I think if we're getting to a position where perhaps there's going to be total reorganisation, that there might actually be some merit in actually looking at how all the costs are actually built up from the ground upwards, because I know an ex-portfolio holder is no longer with us, believed in zero-based budgeting, but I do think there is some merits in actually understanding completely how the budget's put together, because, you know, we may well be sharing the budget with other organisations later on. So, you know, perhaps, you know, agreeing with Graham, there is some sort of benefits in maybe looking at more detail.
Does anyone else have any comments?
Richard can come in if I get anything wrong or miss anything. But your informal meeting on Monday the 6th will be during the day, as I understand it, so that you can look at what you wish to do. And Monday the 13th of January, we've put... Yeah, that's an evening meeting. And I suppose at the moment, I think we've put in for hold for all portfolio holders for that evening. So it would be, you know, on the Monday the 6th, as you know, you'll get a presentation.
I'll tend to talk you through the kind of high level, you know, build up of that budget at very sort of high levels. We did an introduction for both General Fund and HRA, so I'd still do that. You know, more than happy to do it on the 6th, yeah.
Just to clarify, the 6th is the evening as well. Ian Ford's just... No, that's fine. That's my fault. 6th is the evening, 13th is they're both evening meetings. Both evening meetings. Yeah.
May I suggest that the formal meeting on Monday the 6th is the meeting when we'll shortlist the cabinet members that we would like to speak to. But in the meantime, request that they all hold the evening of Monday the 13th available. And obviously straight after the meeting on the 6th, we can let the cabinet members know if we'd like to see them on the 13th. I'm happy to. What, do you want to bring it forward to 6:30? It's up to members here because obviously some do have other work commitments or whatever.
How about but seven, I think 7:30 is quite a late start if it's going to go on. So I would quite happily go for 7, but I would struggle if it was 6:30.
We're happy to reschedule for 7. Yeah, there's no problem with that. I'm happy to do that. So, okay then. So, broadly speaking, do we need a proposal in respect for the recommendations, or are we just happy to? Yeah. Can I have a? I'll propose to have a second for the recommendations, please. Mark. Okay. So obviously, cabinet members will be notified, and then we can shortlist from there which ones we would like to speak to. So that's item 5. Just jump back now. I think we're nearly there. As we jump back to no, that's it. I think that's it. That's it. Yes. Okay. So thanks very much for coming. I'm sure you'll be looking forward to your Christmas reading from the leader. And hopefully we can come up with some constructive comments in the new year. So thanks very much for your time, and thanks for Richard and the officers for coming along this evening. So with that,